to everyone. I am Dr.D.B.Kumar and I will be discussing with you a few things in the approach to prepare for Indian Constitution, Indian polity for the purpose of prelims as well as mains. You know that Constitution of India and Indian polity, they form a very important segment of general studies both in prelims as well as in mains. You have a complete paper on Indian Constitution, polity and governance in mains. So please don't look at those few questions only in prelims. You also look at the complete paper that you have on Constitution, governance and polity in mains. But today we will just try to explore how one is supposed to approach this part of general studies for the prelims first, and we will build on this so that we can, take up some issues with regards to the main syllabus. What basic books is one supposed to refer to when it is Constitution of India and if it is, polity as well? You know that the syllabus talks about Indian polity and governance. Please remember that you are talking about polity, not politics. Politics refers to the different strategies adopted by different political parties in the course of their efforts to, capture state power from the government, and the different ideologies that different political parties would represent. That is part of politics. So we are not talking about politics at all. We are talking about Indian polity, which is based on Constitution and its working. When you talk about Constitution and its working, you are referring to when you work the Constitution, its governance. When the Constitution is begun to be worked, it becomes governance. Which means to have a good grip over this part of general studies, you have to understand the Constitution first, the basic foundations and the basic framework of the entire Constitution. Then you get into the next stage where you see how the Constitution is being worked, which will lead you to understand the basic framework of governance and the issues in governance. You should always start with a very basic book that I always refer to the students, which is NCERT, Indian Constitution at Work. This is class 11 NCERT. After getting to know the terms, the basic principles, you can move into higher books. In addition to Indian Constitution at Work, you can also read Citizen and Government, again for basics. Citizen and Government is also NCERT. Once you start reading these books, Citizen and Government and of course Indian Constitution at work, then perhaps you can also start reading, the Bare Act. Bare Act is Constitution in terms of its articles and different chapters, so that you know the exact words that are used in different articles under different chapters of the Constitution. So, for this, you can read Constitution of India by P.M. Bakshi. By P.M. Bakshi. This gives the bare Constitution. It gives the basic meaning of the basic provisions of different articles, the basic meaning, but it does not have an elaborate discussion and elaborate analysis. And it also does not, really try to explain the different terms, for which you are going to read these NCERT books, which are Indian Constitution at Work and Citizen and Government. Well, what we will do, to only understand how one should approach Indian Constitution, Indian polity from the standpoint of prelims, I will discuss with you a very simple topic which is got to do with the meaning of the Constitution, and that will give you, a kind of brief, introduction to Indian Constitution, Indian polity. But as I go forward in our discussions later on, please also remember that your understanding of Indian Constitution, polity, governance also includes the interpretations being given by the Supreme Court of India when the Supreme Court sits in judgment over important constitutional cases, where it interprets the provisions of the Constitution, clarifies the content of the provisions of the Constitution in clearest possible terms, and those judgments of the Supreme Court involving the interpretation of the Constitution is an extremely important resource for us to properly deal with questions that come in mains. Well, let me introduce a very simple idea. I am going to tell you what you should understand by constitutionalism and constitution. So I'll just put it like this: constitutionalism versus constitution. Many people consider that constitutionalism is almost the same as the Constitution. They are not. I'll say this: a country may have a constitution, may not have constitutionalism. So then, what is constitutionalism? Constitutionalism implies, you can in fact take down a few things as I go forward. Constitutionalism is, the philosophy underlying the Constitution, where there is philosophy that underlies the Constitution. In fact, I will condition this also. It is a philosophy that underlies a democratic constitution. I have deliberately, mentioned that it is a philosophy that underlies a democratic constitution because a democratic constitution makes the people central to governance. So we are concerned with a democratic constitution which considers people as central to governance, where the constitution is for the well-being, the welfare of the people. When we say it makes people central to governance, this philosophy implies that the state, the government, and the constitution also are for the well-being and the welfare of the people. The well-being and the welfare of the people. In other words, everything that the state does, every law that the state passes, every institution that the state creates, is supposed to be for the purpose of improving the well-being of the citizens, the subjects of the country, and helping them in their progress, in their development, so that these people are able to enjoy their freedoms and also protect their dignity and realize their full potential. Well, please remember, constitutionalism I will break up constitutionalism so that it becomes a little more simpler for you. What are the basic principles which are part of constitutionalism? Well, number one, constitutionalism implies principles to protect the basic freedoms of the people, constitutions under the philosophy implies that there should be principles in the constitution which seek to protect the freedoms of the people and to maintain and also to maintain their dignity. Very well. Number two, constitutionalism recognizes the need for a government the need for a government but insists upon limitations on the exercise of governmental power. There is a need for the government without which there cannot be a stable society with, with order, social security, where the individual freedoms, rights are being protected, and where conditions are being, created and also protected to help the people develop their personality and enjoy their freedoms. So, which is why there is a need for the government, where the government will try to ensure that the society is stable, that laws are being, followed by the citizens and the people, only to protect societal stability, only to help the people enjoy their freedoms and liberties. And therefore, where these laws also help the people to pursue their ambitions, their aspirations, so that they are able to develop their personality. So, constitutionalism definitely recognizes the need for the government, but its focus is, it insists upon limitations on the exercise of governmental power. Because these limitations are to protect the freedoms and the liberties of the people. Without these limitations, if there are no limitations on the exercise of governmental power, then you know that exercise of state power becomes arbitrary. So, I am just going to mention that if there are no limitations on the exercise of governmental power, then governance becomes arbitrary. When you say arbitrary, you are saying that actions are not anymore based on laws passed by the legislatures and executive acts. So, when those people who exercise state power are exercising state power without any, without the power being based on the laws of the state and the acts passed by the government, that kind of exercise of power becomes arbitrary. Therefore, constitutionalism is focused on limitations. Those limitations will prevent arbitrary exercise of state power. Alright. Now, constitutionalism also has one more very important principle. it rests on the culture of justification of exercise of power. What do you mean depends on justifications on the exercise of state power, governmental power? It's very simple. Every decision and every action by people in authority must be justified. Must be justified on the ground that it is to promote the well-being of the people. Every time a decision is taken by a person in authority, every time an action is executed by a person in authority, it must be justified to the people that this decision, this action is for the purpose of promoting the well-being of the people and protecting their freedoms. This is a very, very important element of constitutionalism, the culture of justification, where the culture of justification is completely different from the culture of authority. Culture of authority implies that those in authority, those in power, exercise power based on, their own whims and fancies, their own inclinations, their own motivations, which are to serve themselves. The inclinations, the motivations on the basis of which they take decisions and carry out actions is to, promote their well-being, the well-being of those in power, the well-being of those exercising authority, but not the well-being of the people. That is called a culture of authority. But constitutionalism is based on this culture of justifications. Right? So, all principles of justification must be followed so that people clearly understand that actions being carried out, that decisions being taken are after all meant for their well-being. That is a very, very important element of constitutionalism. Finally, you have one more important element of constitutionalism. Well, constitutionalism includes the principle that, or I'll put it this way, I suppose it is the fourth principle. Constitutionalism recognizes that the Constitution contains principles which can deal with all which can deal with issues, problems, right? Issues, problems of the expanding future. Constitutionalism declares that the Constitution should contain principles which can deal with issues, problems of the expanding future, but not some rules to deal with the passing hour. A very important element of constitutionalism is this. This philosophy of constitutionalism declares that the Constitution should contain such principles which can deal with problems of the society, issues of society in an expanding future. In other words, it is supposed to be having this vision. The Constitution should be based on a vision of the future. And in that vision of the future, what kind of issues, what kind of problems can crop up. That is very important, in this philosophy of constitutionalism. Well, lastly, of course, it is part of these ideas only, but I am simply breaking it up into its elements. Constitutionalism implies or recognizes that there should be checks on the impulses of elected majorities. What we are saying is, these elected majorities are temporary, where the elected majorities could pass certain laws which are perhaps going to, help the party in power without necessarily helping in the progress of the society, or the elected majorities which are temporary anyway. They could be, coming out with executive acts and legislative acts which are only seeking to promote the particular ideology of the party, which may not be really in the best interests and the well-being of the people in the long term. So, constitutionalism declares that the Constitution should contain certain instruments, certain principles which can always check such kind of, impulses, right, of temporary majorities, where these impulses are, specific to that party in power. I suppose these 4 or 5 principles that I discussed with you are basic to the philosophy of constitutionalism. I'll go back to the statement that I made first. I mentioned to you that the country may have a constitution it may not have constitutionalism. I hope you have understood. You know, you can have a country which is being ruled, which is being governed by a dictator or by the military. Now, the dictator is carrying out his actions, or even the military is carrying out governance on the basis of a constitution. There is a constitution. For the military to act, for the dictator to act, there is a constitution. For example, the constitution that is being used by a dictator is actually made up of what? A series of ideas which are, you know, the ideas of the dictator, his personal views, and which serve his inclinations, his motivations without necessarily serving the larger interests of the society, and where they are also not helping in the progress of the society and also not protecting the liberties, freedoms of the people. Even the dictator is basing his actions on the constitution. The military, which is running the state, is perhaps also basing its actions on something that is written in the form of a constitution, but that constitution does not have constitutionalism, because, you know, that constitution on the basis of which the military is acting, on the basis of which the dictator is carrying out his actions, lack all these 4 or 5 principles that I discussed with you. No check on exercise of power, alright, no justifications that the actions are being taken for the well-being of the people, the welfare of the people, and serving the best interests of the society in the long run. So all these things that are discussed, which are basic elements of constitutionalism, are not part of that constitution, where the constitution is still there but lacking all these essential elements, and where the dictator or the military in power, you know, is carrying out actions based on this kind of constitution which lacks constitutionalism. So this is, I hope, going to make it very clear to you that you may have a constitution, you may not have constitutionalism. Yeah, we'll continue up later.